I'd like to tell you a story. This story is about how I went from being a fundamentalist Christian to being an atheist, and my journey along the way. I grew up in a Christian home, and that is kind of an understatement. By I grew up in a Christian home, I mean my dad was a pastor, his dad before him was a pastor. We went to church like 5 days a week. I was also homeschooled, so kind of everything about my social life especially was all wrapped around Jesus-y church stuff. So as I got older, I started getting, more and more into Bible stuff because that was the thread that connected all of my different, the people I knew, the activities that I did, everything was connected to being about church in some way. So I continued to do things that would get me further into church. I did competitive Bible quizzing and all sorts of Bible memorization things, and eventually started a job that I like to call being an evangelical. And if a lot of you know me, probably from the last 7 years of me being on the road as an evangelical, going around teaching Bible stories and juggling and doing all sorts of tricks. But it's gotten a lot harder over time, and especially since 2016. So let's get back to my story. So around high school, I started having panic attacks because I was, tormented by the idea that most people that God has made were destined for eternal destruction. And not just like destruction, but like eternal conscious torment. That's a foundational part of Christianity, is that if you're not in the club, I'd guess really only about 30% of people were going to heaven. That was kind of the odds that it was given to me at. And I was like, every 2 out of 3 people, even if you said 1/2 of people are going to heaven, 1/2 are going to hell, that was such a heavy and, developmentally inappropriate thing for me to learn at 8 years old, was that just the idea of eternity, everything that has a beginning has an end, so the idea of eternity is like painful in and of itself. I remember many nights as a kid just being absolutely tormented by this idea that I was going to have to spend forever somewhere, and most people wouldn't have the hope that was brought to them in Jesus. So I did this for 7 years. 7 years of traveling and speaking and being very publicly known for my beliefs and for sharing my beliefs in a very interesting way, because I thought I was doing good. And I started that when I was like about 18, and I went to a Christian college, went to this garbage school in Michigan called Cornerstone. And all through my time at Cornerstone, I was trying to ask kind of the question of, why do I believe this? How do I know if this is true? And if I don't know it's true, does that change things? And it was just a horrible place to kind of have those questions, because the presumption that you're at a Christian college for is that you all agree with each other. You're all like, yep, we all buy into this weird cult thing that we're all worshiping the same God. And I didn't like to fit in. I didn't want to fit in. And I kept trying to find interesting ways of expressing myself and being a part of the community, but not like the same way as everyone else, because about 80% of the people there had the exact same personality. I didn't want to fit in with that. So I kept getting pushed more and more to the outside. And the more honest I was with this struggle of saying, I don't know if this is really true. I don't know that what I believe is because I chose it. Maybe it's just because my dad was a pastor and his dad was a pastor, and I grew up going to a Christian church, and all of these Christian-y things that were around me all the time. It was 2016, things really came to a head. I I was on part of the worship team at college because there were required chapel credits. You had to go to chapel at least like twice a week to hit all these credits, and I really hated going because I was, spending the whole time thinking like, is this real? Is this real? Do we know this? Do we know this? And the more answers I got and the more I studied Christianity and especially the Bible, I realized that we don't know, that this is all entirely by faith. It's just, we're assuming that this is correct. So I thought, this is all I know. Christianity is all I know, so I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to be honest and say, like, I don't know if this is true, but I hope it is. And maybe if it's not, at least I'll be a good person with my life. And isn't that the point of religion, is to give us a framework and a way to work where you just want to expand good in the world. You want to teach people to be good. And I hoped that that's what I was accomplishing with my shows and these camps and things that I did, was to tell people about a loving God, to inspire them to live their lives with love and grace. But in 2016, I wrote down for this chapel application to play bass on the team. I had to write down my testimony. That's a very Christian-y sort of thing. What's your testimony? Would you like to share your testimony? I'm like, all right, it's a testimony. And instead of just resubmitting the same form that I wrote last time about like, hi, I accepted Jesus when I was 7 years old, and I did it mostly to get social acceptance, but now I'm stuck in it. Instead of just giving kind of my routine bullshit answer that I give to people, I was honest. I just said, yeah, I don't know if I believe in God. I don't know if this is true, but I like being on worship team because it gives me something to participate in, and that feels, that was the only part of chapel that I liked, was participating, playing music. And I got called into the office at my garbage school that I went to, and they sat me down. They were like, we looked over your questions and we've got some concerns. And their concerns were that I wasn't, accepting the brainwashing very well. I wasn't just putting this all inside my brain and being like, this is 100% true, 100% true, 100% true. I don't know that knowing anything with 100% certainty is possible. I think, especially the more that I've grown up, that sort of black and white literalism, I think, is just a developmental stage that children need to go through, that you need some concrete answers as you are a child, but then as you grow up and as you get older and as you're able to deal with more complicated thoughts and ideas, then what happens is that you set down that kind of, this is left and this is right and there is no in between, but you learn that left and right are just kind of directions and everything has a bit of subjectiveness to it. And that, I learned that in like everything, in music and studying communication, and it just like the same lesson in every area of life kept coming up, that you can't have everything with certainty, and holding things with certainty is one of the surest ways for it to be brittle and stiff and break and hurt you, and holding things with an absolute grip seemed to be the basis of why it hurt. It was the basis of why I was hurting, was because I couldn't hold on to this belief that 70% of people are just damned to eternal torment. I could not continue believing that. And by expressing even the littlest bit of doubt, of saying, I don't know if this is true because I've been having panic attacks for years just based on this idea. And in 2016, I got into my car and I drove away and I looked for a bridge to drive my car into. And as I was flying down the highway about like 80, 90 miles an hour, I stopped and I just thought, like, this is insane. This is insane that this series of beliefs is causing me so much pain that I would rather end my life than try to continue existing within this framework. And I just kept driving. And I stopped with a friend And then I got up the next morning, continued on, drove all the way to New York to see my girlfriend at the time. Because I didn't know where else to go. I didn't know what else to do, and it feels, when your life is over, when you get to a point where you think, maybe I should die. Whatever beliefs or things you were holding on to that brought you to that conclusion of, I need to kill myself, those need to go. Those are old hat. They are not helping you, clearly. So, since 2016, I've considered myself an agnostic Christian. Kind of Christian in my upbringing and in the religious tradition that I understand. I think everyone needs some sort of religious tradition, some sort of moral grounding, or whatever it is, whatever works for you. I have realized that holding on to the Bible and to this God narrative was ultimately harmful and really destructive to me. So, I guess since 2016, I've been holding things much looser. I've been able to see that not everyone is bad, and I don't think that the very basis of the story that I've been sharing with children for over 7 years now is that you have this sin nature. There is this inherent badness inside of you, and because of that, God had to do something to intervene. And I don't believe any of that anymore. I don't believe that humans are inherently bad. I believe that maybe we're a bit selfish, but if we are given a story to enact that is a positive story in the world, we will enact that story. And if we are given a story where we are bad and despicable and most people are bound for destruction, we will live in accordance to that story. So for years, I have been looking in at Christianity, not really as a member of the church, but as someone who, well, that's all I knew. That's all I knew growing up. That's all I knew from my education. That's all I knew from my friends and my family and my group around me, and I had to let that go. So a month after I decided not to kill myself, Trump was elected. And I realized that the community that I was in was much more concerned with being, I guess, correct or winning, or I don't know, something. In 2016, when Trump got elected, I knew that I could not remain a Christian. And I've thought for a long time, and I guess many years, that I've been looking at how do I try to change things? How do I try to improve things? And what I have come to a conclusion on here in the year of 2020 is that the church is an irredeemable mess. Is that God isn't real, and that this story of certainty that we are telling ourselves and that we are teaching our children is damaging. It is damaging not just to the children, which I believe it is, but it's damaging to our democracy, it's damaging to our country. We are enabling fascists and racists to control our country, and we're doing it in the name of a loving God. There are other reasons I don't consider myself a Christian. I think because I'm a bisexual man, and there is no room in the church for queer people. There is no room in the church for queer people, and I know this with certainty because I grew up in the church. And if queer people were accepted, or if queerness in any way, if gayness was ever accepted by Christianity, they would say it. And the reason they don't say it is because they don't have a place for queer Christians. They do not have a place for anyone that lives outside of this heteronormative culture. And that's really what Christianity has become. It's just a culture. It's a colonialist, white supremacist, heteronormative culture that is hurting so many people. And I'm not here to try to convince anyone to give up on believing in God, but if you believe in God because of me, if you think that Jesus died for your sin, whatever that means. If you think that because of me, I'd like to say that I do not believe those things. I am not a Christian. I do not support the church. I think we should empty the pews. I think we should tax churches. I think we should do so many things because Christian institutions aren't doing good work anymore. They're just spreading hate. And I think Christianity, in the iteration that we have today, is largely political. It is largely based on a cultural belonging more than it is any kind of belief. And if there are any Christians that continue practicing Christianity because they truly do love and care, I'd say get out. Stop calling yourself a Christian. Jesus wasn't a Christian. The term Christian didn't come until hundreds of years after Jesus. Jesus didn't try to establish Christianity. He just was there to reform Judaism. I've got many other thoughts on the Bible and things that I will be sharing in future videos, but I think it's important that you know where I stand. Christians have shown themselves to be more concerned with being right than being good. And I would rather be good.